Claude Douglas Clower, United States Navy, Vietnam. I interviewed Doug in Brenham, Texas, January 7, 2010. Sadly, almost 9 months later, he passed away at the age of 79, but he told a great story, folks. He was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. He flew the F-8s, which were the Crusaders, and the F-4 Phantoms, and he did about 900 carrier landings, 200 of those at night, so he saw a lot over there, folks. But he was a commander, like I said, retired as a commander after 20 years of service, went in 1955, and was even at the Gulf of Tonkin in 1964, just before Vietnam really got going. But sadly, he was shot down over North Vietnam. It was the November 19th, 1967. He was shot down and was a prisoner of war 5.5 years. I've had several stories you've heard, but these stories of survival, they just touched my heart. And he was liberated March the 17th, 1973, after, like I said, 5.5 years of being a prisoner of war. But just tells a great story. Was a highly decorated veteran. I read in the obituary 34 medals, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and 5 Bronze Stars, folks. It's possible he did it. This an unsung hero. And Harry Marshall, I want to thank you for making it possible. You chose Doug's story, Commander Clower's story, and I'm so glad that you did, Harry. Harry's worked with me before. He's a continued sponsor of my work, and God bless you, Harry. I so appreciate you and your dedication to our veterans, our country, and to this project as I continue to go into my archives. I have over 800 stories that nobody's even heard yet. So as we keep doing this one by one, Harry, God bless you. Thank you for it. Folks, if you'd like to sponsor a story, or here's what I'm going to start doing also. A lot of you have people in your family that have served. A father, a grandfather, an uncle, a great-grandpa, somebody in your family that has served, even a grandmother, women in war. And if you have somebody, if you'd like to sponsor a story in honor of them, I would like to give you that opportunity. So you would basically go through the same process. You would click on the link and include your loved one's story with a little note that you want to honor your loved one. Like my dad served in the Army during Korea, so I'd want to honor Robert William Capetto, who served in Korea, 51 to 53, and just give me a little information, and then we can do a sponsorship like that. It doesn't have to be one of my stories that you pick. We could pick, I'll pick a story, but we can do it in honoring your loved one. So if that's something that would interest you, we can do that also with just a normal sponsorship. I hope that made sense. So we can honor your loved one, or you can just choose a veteran. LarryCapetto.com, you can donate there, or choose a veteran. And in the video description of all my videos and in the comment section, you'll find that information. I want to get into this story, folks. He's been gone for 14 years now, but I'm glad we can honor him right now with his memory, and this tells a wonderful, I just listened to the story again. I just forgot a lot of it, to be honest with you, but it's a powerful story. So let's honor him right now. Doug Clower, Commander Clower, and just keep subscribing to this channel, those of you that haven't, and share these stories, and I'll talk to you in my next broadcast. God bless you. You're a football player.
I was. That's the reason I came to Texas.
Doug, how old are you now?
I was 79 the 30th of November.
Okay. Now, what year did you go in the military?
1955.
Right after Korea, huh?
Right after that. I was in college and stayed out of college till, and I got a phone call one night and said they was going to draft me. And and this gal said it was a collect phone call, and I didn't expect it. I said, I don't like to collect phone calls unless I know who it's from. And they said, a Mrs. Black. I said, I don't know them. And she said, tell him Edwin Lewis. I knew her. I'd graduated from high school from her. And she said, Doug, you're out of school and they're going to draft you in 30 days. And I went looking.
So in 55, you joined the Air Force?
Air Force,
Air Corps?
Navy.
Navy.
Let's get that straight. And that's, you know, you're talking about the second team when you're talking about the Air Force.
Where'd you go to basic training?
Pensacola.
And did you want to fly at that time?
Well, the thing was that happened as I was sitting down there, and I was working as an engineer for an engineering outfit, and they said, well, all you pay, and I went shopping, and the Navy offered me a deal for the Civil Engineering Corps, and I went to Houston to sign up, and the guy said, you got to be interviewed by one more officer. And I went down, and he said, how would you like to fly? And the only thing I knew about flying, it paid more money. And I said, that's something I've always wanted to do. And he said, I said, but I'm not eligible. And I said, I'm married, I got a kid and everything else. And he said, we got a brand new program just for you. So I was in the first aviation officer candidate class in 55.
And now, between 55 and what, for 10 years, nothing's going on? Vietnam kind of got going about 64?
I flew Crusaders
Okay.
from in the late 50s and early 60s. And then went to postgraduate school in Naval in Monterey and got a master's. And I already had 2 engineering degrees. And got a master's and got assigned to the Ticonderoga. So I was at the Gulf of Tonkin on November the 4th, 1964. I was on the Admiral's staff as a meteorologist, and did the forecast and made 2 cruises to Vietnam in 64 and 65 and 66, and got assigned to an F-4 squadron in 66 as operations officer. And some real interesting stories along in that line, but
well, let's talk about, I mean, you were in the Vietnam War.
I made 4 cruises to Vietnam.
What do you mean by cruisers? What is it?
The Navy, basically the carriers, I was always aboard an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
I made 2 to the Mediterranean and 4 to Vietnam in my naval career. Mm-hmm. And they usually last 6 to 7 months, and a month going and a month coming. And the old Navy rotation while you're on sea duty is you go either to the Mediterranean or the Pacific. And so out of those years, I made 6 cruises, 2 on the Independence, to the Mediterranean flying Crusaders, F-8s, 2 to Vietnam when I was a ship's company, and 2 flying F-4s as a fighter pilot.
So you're providing ground support for the troops, or what do you do?
Main mission was air superiority.
Okay.
And it's fighter cover.
Okay.
You've heard of Top Gun?
Yes.
Well, Top Gun was conceived because the Crusaders had been taught, the Navy up till the middle 60s had a 2 fighter type mission. We had what we call the all-weather fighters and the day fighters. The Crusader was a day fighter. And we did dog fighting, as it was known, where you see him and you get in position to fire. And the night fighters, you're gonna shoot him down and not see him. Well, the Navy wore out all of its day fighters, and the world was, we were never gonna have a war where we had to see him and shoot him down and whip him. Well, Vietnam came along and that wasn't true. So the F-8 kill ratio was extremely high against MiGs. The F-4 kill ratio against MiGs was low. And so they took a bunch of those of us that had flown F-8s and put them over in F-4s. And if you read the book, The Gray Ghost, the F-4, there's a page in there about me and going through the RAG, which is a replacement air group. And I went over there and I was with these instructors who had flown air superiority, but had done it in all weather. And they were teaching a run-out tactic. And they told us about it. And so I went in and they explained what they were doing. And so I came by him, and rather than doing what he said, I went, "Hi." And when I came back, I beat him, and we were, this instructor, and I won 5 for 5 of the fights. We went back, and he said, I'm going to give you below average. And I said, why? I beat you. And he said, you didn't do it right. So then the next day, we did the same thing with another instructor, and I won all. So the commanding officer took me out the next day. And we flew, and he knew the airplane lots better than I did. I didn't have that much time in it. And we drove 5 for 5 at ties. And he took me to his office and said, you'll never fly another ACM, combat air maneuvering, in this squadron. You can go teach that squadron you're going to how to do it. And so we taught the F4. That was that group of us that had been in Crusaders were the group that helped start the F4. And that syllabus that we had used started Top Gun. Okay.
Interesting. Now, as far as the combat in Vietnam, tell me what the F4 was doing.
The F4's main mission was air superiority. In other words, we were there mainly to protect the dive bombers. But the F4 was so versatile that we carried around 14 500-pounders. And we went in as flak suppress. In other words, we went in front of the attack bombers to take out any anti-aircraft guns, and we took those out so they could get to the target. So it was still kind of an air superiority type deal. We seldom of the F4s went in after the main target.
So you're supporting the bombers, you said? Or
The attack bombers, which is a dive bomber off the ship.
So how many F4s are around
For the day?
for support? No.
Oh, you'd have 4 to 8 according to how many, and you'd probably have 16 attack bombers.
So what are these attack bombers targeting?
Well, they were targeting bridges.
And the VC or the North Vietnamese had anti-aircraft guns?
And SAMs.
Capable of knocking you out of the air?
Yes, and SAMs. Are you familiar with the SAM?
Tell me.
It is a surface-to-air missile, and it's radar homed in. And with the counter-electronic gear we had, you could see, you could tell that when they were searching for you, you could also tell when they were locked up. And the counter maneuver is to try to get it at 90 degrees to you and let it get in as close as you can, and then you roll over the top of it. It's not a fun feeling to be.
What was the toughest thing you had to do in Vietnam as far as combat or flying? I mean, was there an incident that was harder than the others or more difficult?
I would say that Phu Quyen, going after the airfield at Phu Quyen, was probably the worst. Phu Quyen was the major jet base, fighter base for North Vietnam. I've flown very few missions in the South. And we were going in there 3 times a day with mass coverage, and the Air Force at the same time was going 3 times a day. And we lost 2 airplanes up there out of 14, out of 12, 2 out of 12. In the month of November, October and November of '67, and a squadron of 14 airplanes and about 20 crews, we lost 5 crews. Out of that 5 crews, 1, 2, 3, 5 out of the 14 came home. The other 5 were POWs.
Now, were you shot down? Tell me about being shot down.
I was, sometimes you can open your mouth and you shouldn't do it, you know. The wing ops officer asked me, and I was ops officer of the squadron, and said, the Intrepid, which is another, I was aboard the USS Carl C, and the Intrepid was out without fighters, and their main mission would have been south. They wanted to send them up north, and up North Vietnam, and they didn't have enough fighter coverage. So he asked me, could we give him 4 airplanes to support him, and I said, I don't have 4, I got 2. And I said, He said, well, the rules say for 4. And I said, and I knew Butch O'Neill, who was the chief of staff. I said, go tell the chief of staff, Captain Butch O'Neill, I said, go tell him that I'll go up there with 2. We hadn't seen any MiGs up there. Well, I got up there and we got jumped by 4 MiGs and 4 MiG-17s and 2 21s. My story is I had them all surrounded, but one slipped out of my circle. You know? I was playing with one of the 17s. I saw him, and he was turning fairly tight, and I knew he was going behind me, and I wasn't worried about him. I looked out and saw another MiG-17 out in front of me, and I fired a sidewinder missile at him. And regardless of what McNamara talked about, we had all the weapons and everything else we had. We were carrying 2 old sidewinders and 2 new ones, and you could set the firing order. And I set it for an old one, a new one, and an old one, and a new one. And I fired a Bravo, and it went right past him and blew up beside him. And I pulled tighter and fired the second one. About that time, somebody said, brake. We just turned as hard as you can, brake left, and I broke. And the next thing I saw was this missile come out in front of my right wing, which is what saved me, because I had broke. And about 5 or 10 feet in front of my wing, the proximity fuse went off and blew the whole right wing off. F-4 doesn't fly too good with one wing off of it. I told my backseater to eject. And after I told him, I said, eject. And then I said, eject the second time. And when I said it then, I pulled the curtain and went out. I landed in a rice field, water up to about my knees, about ankle deep in the rice field. And the little guy ran up to me, about 5 foot tall, and held his fingers on me. And I looked at him, kind of smiled at him, and then they shot those AK-47s over my head. And I reached in and took the .38 I had in the shoulder holster and held it out like this. And he took it, and it had a lanyard on it around my neck. And he started turning it, trying to turn it back against me. And it was too short. And I sat there and watched him. And then I held my hand out, and he gave it back to me. And I put it back in my holster. And then they shot those AK-47s over my head again, so I gave him the shoulder holster and all. I still had a 5-shot aluminum frame on my frame. Then they all came up and cut my clothes off of me with a machete. And basically streaked me for the 50 miles to Hanoi and started the torture. The torture is, after 3 days of it, I knew they had broken me. I knew physically and mentally that I was broken. There was no question in my mind that I would do or say what they wanted me to say or do. Not necessarily the truth, because you can always lie, but you would do something. And I thought, now they let me lay there a while. I was laying on that cold concrete floor, hungry, hurting, pain of all my shoulders and everything else, because they'd taken my arms and wrapped them behind my back and pulled them over my head. And I thought, what is the most important thing in the world to me? And I remembered my mother. My mother never sent me to church. She took me, made me sit beside her, and I wiggled around. And I said, God, give me the strength to do those things which are right in your eyes. Felt a little better. And as I lay there, I thought, what's the second most important thing? I said, God, give me the strength to do those things which are right in your eyes and the eyes of my country. And third, what was the most important thing? That I could come home and look at guys like you and say, I maybe didn't do as good as you could do, but I did my best. God, give me the strength to do those things which are right in your eyes, the eyes of my country, and the eyes of my fellow man. I don't think in the next 5 years, 5.5 years, I have not, and I was convinced the communists would make me denounce God. They haven't. I've never betrayed my country, and I can say I did my best. Now, to say that I haven't lied when they tortured me, I have. You know, we were taught, one of the hardest things I had to learn was to learn to steal. I remember the first time I stole a little piece of bread, God caught me and stepped on my hand, you know, because I was that hungry, and I stole a little piece of bread that was laying on the ground. And when I got back in the room, my only thought was not to steal anymore, was that I got to get better at this. Although I've been taught not to steal all my life, you know. But I was to serve the next 5 of my 5.5 years. I was a senior ranking officer of my group. I have served with true heroes. I can say that the men that I served with, the 57 men that were with me most of that time. Are you familiar with the Sante? Are you familiar with Sante?
No, no.
Okay, Sante is where the Green Berets came in and tried to get us out. We had been gone 2 weeks when the Green Berets came in. 59 of them landed on the ground, and they were on the ground 27 minutes trying to save us. We'd been gone about 2 weeks. And they killed 140 Vs in 27 minutes, 59 of them. Those are heroes. They were told that their chance, old Bull Simons, when he asked for those guys, those Green Berets at Fort Bragg, he said, I want volunteers for a mercy mission. Your chances of coming home are slim. You won't draw any extra money, no per diem, and I need volunteers. Nearly the whole room volunteered, and he took 59 of the finest men I've ever met in my lifetime. Those are true heroes. They volunteered and they came after us. People say their mission was a failure. It wasn't a failure. We could now tell the young officers and the young men that they came once. The Americans came after us once, and they'll come again. You don't know how much that means. You know?
How long were you a prisoner?
5.5 years.
I know this is kind of a loaded question, but what was the most difficult part of that 5.5 years? Was there a time it was more difficult? Or
I think the first part, after the major torture was over.
What's the major torture?
First week, first 2 months.
Where they broke you?
Oh yeah, they put my hands behind my back and tied them behind my back with cuffs and that kind of stuff, and then wrapped them over the top of my head and touch your arm, try to make you touch your toes, you know, and get a rope on there and ratchet you up, you know. Boredom is the worst enemy of a prisoner. If you're, but I would rather go through torture than to spend 10 days in solitary. Solitary to me is torture in itself. I have, by many standards, I have very little solitary time. I have about a week, and then I have 45 days in the Christmas of 70 when I was spending solitary. And I would rather just about do anything than spend that time in solitary. You know, you just don't, when there's nothing to read and nothing to do, and all that one 40-watt light bulb shining in your eyes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know. But, again, huh?
Let me ask you a question. You said the boredom was very difficult. You can't ever be trained to go through something like this, can you? I mean, how Did you pray? What did you think about to get you through this time?
We had been through a survival course, which did a pretty good job of telling us part of what was going to happen to us. I think the Navy Survival School and the Air Force Survival School both were outstanding in that way. Now, we didn't see the harsh torture in survival school, but we saw minor portions of it. We didn't see the boredom for long periods of time that we saw in Vietnam. That we didn't, because they had two weeks to train, 2 weeks in survival school, and we spent 5.5 years. So, time is not, and I have led some outstanding men. The old story is, there they go. I must rush after them, for I am their leader. And that is very true of the men that I was with in Vietnam.
Now, John McCain was a part of this group?
He was never we never saw each other face to face.
No, but he's in
In the same group, yes.
And tell me again where you are and what...
Okay.
Who are your captors? The North Vietnamese?
North Vietnamese.
And they weren't following the Geneva Convention?
No, they never followed it. They don't know what it meant. They would, they would always say you appreciate the.
Put it back on. Put it over here. No problem.
Let me tell you about.
The North Vietnamese, and you were where now when you were a prisoner?
I was in Hanoi most of the time.
So is this what the Hanoi Hilton is called?
Yes, the Hanoi Hilton. Okay.
Tell me about that name. How come it's called the Hanoi Hilton?
Some POW decided to call it the Hilton Hotel. It was a prison built by the French. Ho Chi Minh had spent time in it. The beds were concrete. There were ankles on the small 7x9 cells where there were two to four of us in them. There were leg irons at the foot and everything. There were many of those in there. But after 70, we were all brought back. After the Son-Tay raid, it scared the Vietnamese so much they brought us all back to Hanoi, into the Hilton. And we stayed there when they brought the 57 guys that I had at Son-Tay back into a room. We laid out our space on the floor, on the bed. And we took a piece of red chalk and marked it. And we had 19 inches by 6 feet for every man. That's how much room he had. Your shoulders are wider than 19 inches. That's how much room we had when they crammed us into there. But it was wonderful because we were able to talk. Up to that point, we'd been kept in 2 and 3 and 4 man rooms. And at that point, we were all together. We taught classes, school, after we got together. There was hardly anybody of mine in the group that came out of there that couldn't speak or read a foreign language, could not work a calculus problem, and we taught school every day. The average age in 1970 of the group that I was with was 33 years old. The average education was in excess of 4 years of college. So the education level, the age, was far superior to any other POW group that had ever existed. They were outstanding. I have nothing but praise for every one of them. I don't have a one in my group that I wouldn't trust to the utmost.
How are you a prisoner for over 5 years? I mean, do you give up hope of ever getting out? I mean, what kind of news were you getting about the war? I mean, did you...
they gave us propaganda every day. Over that little radio, they gave us all kinds of propaganda. But hey, you pretty soon learned that they would talk about Quezon and how they were winning at Quezon. Then on one day they quit talking about Quezon. And you pretty soon figure out, as long as they're winning, they talk about it. When they're losing, they don't talk about it.
So as I'm listening to you, Doug, I'm thinking, what you're going through, and it wasn't like Hogan's Heroes, was it? I mean, you guys, were you being treated harsh this whole time, or was it just a?
No, but we would never. You got to realize that I got to 130 pounds. You're without no protein, which we didn't get. You start losing your fingernails and toenails where you don't have any. You know.
What did you eat?
Well, I ate cabbage for 140 days straight, twice a day. And then we went to what we call pumpkin, but it was old orange scotch, and then we ate it for 140 straight days. I'll tell you a story, you'll like this one. We were at Sante, and a black American from Austin, Tom Madison, an outstanding individual. He spent 2 years in solitary because he said, when an American sees another American, regardless to his rank, he'll salute him. We'll show respect to each other. And they put Tom in solitary. And he stayed there for 2 years, and they brought him in the room with me at Sante, and Tom saluted me. The guard said, if you salute, we'll put you back in solitary. And Tom said, when I report to my seniors, I salute them. And I said, take it down, Tom, take it down. Oh, a little while after that, we were sitting there one day, and me at about 130 pounds. Can you imagine me at 130 pounds? And this guy was eating what we call sewer green soup, a bowl of soup, greens, like a reed-like plant. They grew it in the sewer. I said it always tastes like violets with kerosene poured across it, you know. But it was all we was getting, it in a little rice. And this guy pushed his soup back, and I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm not hungry. I said, we all hungry, why aren't you eating? He said, I don't want to ruin y'all's soup. I said, tell me what's wrong with it. He says, a bug in it. So I take his bowl of soup and I fool around. I find a water cockroach about the size of my thumb, lay him over on the side, and I said, there's your soup. He said, I'm not going to eat it. I said, if you don't, I am. And Tom punched me and said, you wouldn't eat it all by yourself, would you? We shared that bowl of soup.
What about water?
We were given I would guess about 2 little jugs a day of water. One in the morning, one in the afternoon. Most of the time that was enough. But in the real hot weather, it wasn't. Now, this is the thing people don't realize, and you may have said it too. People say, I don't like cold weather. I don't like hot weather. I can put on enough clothes to keep warm, but I can't take off enough to keep cool. If you've got the clothes. When you've got 2 little cotton, thin pieces and it gets down in the 40s, the whole month of February of '68, my feet never got warm. Cold is painful. Hot is uncomfortable. Don't tell me I'd rather be cold. I'd rather be hot any day if I don't have a choice, okay? There was no heat in those cells. There was no air conditioning, but at least you could get a little breeze once in a while.
Did you ever give up hope of getting out?
Me? Oh no, I'm gonna make it. I'll be here when I hope you live forever, and I'm the last person you speak to.
How about the other guys?
Yeah, a few people, but I don't think. After the Sante raid, we knew Americans would come back. Okay. I have the utmost faith. Our military has never lost a war. We didn't lose the Vietnam War. Hey, our politicians haven't won any peace, but we've never lost a war. When you're with the best, and I have been with the best, you may get discouraged once in a while, but you know they'll be there. I have the utmost faith.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, yeah. Mm-hmm. So tell me about Liberation Day, or what you're liberated.
Let's take that picture out of here right quick. Let's tell you about this picture.
I might have it over
Oh, you got it.
Just tell me about it.
Okay.
And I can show it when you're talking about it. But just tell me about, was that just another day, or was it a great
It was the day we came home. The day we came home, they had brought us back. They had sent us in April of 72. The bombers started coming back downtown. They brought the B-52s in, and they bombed. If you go back to 64, when the Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, I sat in the room with an old admiral, and he sent a message to Washington, if you turn me loose, I'll end this thing in 90 days. And his plan was to start bombing Hanoi, not bomb anywhere else, bomb the heart and work out. It wasn't done until 70, okay, in 72. And so anyway, they started bombing. They sent us a bunch up on the China border. And we stayed up there from April and May of 72 till February of 73. And they brought us back to the camp called the Plantation. The Plantation was called because it was inside of a compound and an old colonial home, 4 columns sitting in front. And there were 9 of us in a room there. And it was the first time we'd ever been situated by shoot down data ranks, and we were there. And they told us we'd be coming home. They came in the day they told us, and they came to the rooms and the Red Cross, and everybody was looking in the doors, and they came in and told us to put on, they issued us a set of civilian clothes, and they told us to put them on. And by the time I got mine on, they came in the cell and told me to put them on my prison clothes. If that doesn't frighten you, you don't understand. Everybody's being told they'll go home, and everybody's putting on clothes to go home, and you're told to put on their prison clothes. But I did, and I stepped outside the door, and I saw 3 Air Force majors coming. And we walked through, they had a tar paper wall between us and the top, and if we opened that tar paper door, I saw nothing but cameras. CBS, ABC, BBC, Ruta, and I said, we're not going out there till they take the cameras down. We don't want to be propaganda. And that's what we thought it was. They put the cameras down, we walked into the big house, as we called it, and they had a long table as I walked into that room with 4 Vietnamese on the corner of this table. Sitting here with 3 Americans, 2 Army majors and an Army sergeant, sitting on the far corner with the 4 neutral countries. And there were 4 seats for us. I walked in and pulled the biggest bluff I have ever pulled in my lifetime. I looked and saw 2 Army majors, fairly young majors, 04s, and I had been an 04 since March of 64. I did not know I had been promoted. I could assume I had been, but I didn't know for sure. And I stood and said, I am Lieutenant Commander C.D. Clower with a data rank of 1 March 64. And I'm assuming I'm the senior American in this room and I'm in charge. Which is perfect military etiquette. This major said, sir, you are. And I said, Major, you may seat your troops. He said, yes. I turned and told my eyes. I said, and he said, request permission to speak. We were using perfect military etiquette. I said, permission granted. And he said, are you the senior POW in this camp? I said, no, Colonel Flynn is. And as far as I know, he's the senior POW in North Vietnam. He said, as far as we know, he is too. He said, can we request permission to speak to him? I said, of course. So he turns to his sergeant, who is his interpreter, and he says in Vietnamese to the camp commander, who we call Bushy because he had a crew cut, and he had been at Sante. He'd been in nearly every camp I'd ever been in. And Bushy then proceeds to tell him that there is no rank among the POWs, that we are not POWs, we're criminals. We have killed women, children, and old folks. And he points to me and says, law is the blackest of them all. I understood enough Vietnamese for that. And that I was the blackest of them all, the blackest of the blacks, and take the criminals to their cells. So they get up and I sit in my chair and he's raises his voice, and two guards grab me under each arm and start dragging me out of my chair. And this major jumps up and says, "Sir, go with them. I promise you we'll never leave here without you." And I get up and walk on out, and I walk over to that cell that you see me with my hands on the picture. And there's the picture, the hands on the inside of the cell. I tell Colonel Flynn what has happened. And those arms are Colonel Flynn and Colonel Wynn. And the guard runs up and says, "Everybody is ready to get on the bus. Get in on the bus. You must go change clothes." So I go down to my room, and all the people are gone out of the room now, and I start changing clothes. And I didn't bring this. I started taking those prison clothes and putting them in a little knapsack that they gave us. I'm one of the few that came home with a full set of P.O.W. clothes, and I still have them. I should have brought them. And he said, you're not allowed to have that. In walked Bushy. Big grin on his face. And he said, walked over, patted me on the back, and said, "La, okay, you can have it." Now, you've got to realize something here. We had, in front of the world press, in front of the world, he had acted like his government wanted him to act. And in front of the world press, I had done what my country expected out of me. But there was not hard feelings between the two of us because we had done our job. I don't believe that, okay? I think he was as fair as he could be under the circumstances. And if that's that picture you're looking at, and then it came out to be in the 100 greatest military photos.
Number 45.
Mm-hmm. Not bad when you see the other pictures in those 45. Mm-hmm.
We're kind of getting to the end of the tape, but I need to ask you some. I mean, I could sit here all day, but you've been. This may be easy or hard for you to answer, but after being a prisoner of war and serving your country and all you've been through, living in a free country, what does freedom mean to you, Doug? What does that mean to you, to have your freedom?
I'm in the greatest country this world has ever seen. There's no question in my mind. I don't want us to be a socialist country. I am the most, not the luckiest person you ever met. I am the most blessed you have ever met. I have had a wonderful life. I grew up in a small town in a small school. I've played in 66 high school football games in my lifetime. We won 60, tied 2, and lost 4. I grew up with a wonderful family. I am married to a wonderful woman. We have been married 57 years. We just lost our daughter last month at 55, our only child. We have 2 grandsons. We have 5 great-granddaughters. I am the most blessed man you have ever met. I consider myself, I have served with heroes. I have led some of the greatest men that ever walked. I not only have that, I've had a wonderful career after I got out of 20 years in the Navy. I've spent 30 years in the engineering construction business. And I've had wonderful people around me. The freedom is being able to get up in the morning and do what I want to do and when I want to do it, and not someone tell me how to do it. I have been blessed all my life.
Wow. What does the flag mean to you as a veteran, the American flag?
I swore when I held up my hand and took my oath as an officer that I would defend the Constitution of the United States of America. I still have that obligation. That flag is a symbol, and I have seen that little flag that I showed you, I have seen us many times. In Michener's book, Bridges of Toqueree, The old admiral has lost Blue Baker, and he's gone to the shore, and he's standing there, and he says, I can nearly do it by sight, but I'm going to read it so I don't do it incorrectly. Why is America lucky enough to have such men? They leave this tiny ship and fly against the enemy. Then they must seek the ship lost on the sea. And then they have to find, when they find it, they have to land upon its pitching deck. Where do we find such men? Let me tell you where we find such men. I came home, and Mother took me to see my 104-year-old great-grandmother, 5 foot tall. She was sitting on that nursing home bed. And we walked in, and she said, who is it? And Mother said, it's Virginia. She said, you hadn't been to see me in a long time. And who's that with you? And she said, Doug. And she said, boy, where have you been? I was 43 years old. And Mother said, he's been at war, man. And she said, I have furnished a lot of labor for those wars. She'd had sons in World War I, sons and grandsons in World War II, grandsons and great-grandsons in Vietnam and Korea. And she had, the women of America are the strong. Lincoln said, no foreign army will drink water out of the Mississippi. If we're defeated, we will be defeated from within. If you think that's strong, stay in this Brenham, Texas, around here. In the industry, I must mention the industry, they'll get on me if they ever see this. I had a real good friend that said, and if they cross the Brazos, they'll have to kill every man, woman, and child. I believe that. We will never be defeated from a foreign army. If we're defeated, we'll be defeated from within. Have I answered your question?
That's good. The two silver stars.
2 silver stars.
And just briefly, give me the citation. What was done to receive those?
Both of those were received as a prisoner of war for leadership and that for torture and leadership.
Can you give me a little more than that, or is that it?
The first one was for my being tortured in that one I told you about. The second one, I'm not sure exactly what it was for. My two Distinguished Flying Crosses, I know what one was for, but I'm not sure what the other one was for. The 5 Bronze Stars for all instances in North Vietnam. Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm not a hero. I served with those, and I mean that.
what does Veterans Day mean to you? Is it another day, or is it?
No, it's not another day. It's to honor those men who gave it all, who gave everything. And there was, let me tell you about one. Have you got time? We got time?
You got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
I don't want to take it all in this story, but give me a little bit of it.
Okay. I served with a Marine named John Frederick. John was in his 5th war in the back seat as a gunner in Vietnam. He'd been in World War II, he'd been in Korea, he'd been in 5 different wars. He was up there 2 years before I got there, a brute of a man, shoulders broad, his arms the size of my legs. He could do 300 push-ups faster than I could count. He's the only man that I truly know the Vietnamese would not walk in a cell alone with him, because they'd hit him with a rifle and he'd thrown him up against the wall. We came back in the big room at the Hanoi Hilton, and that guy gets sick. And I asked for a doctor, and they didn't bring us one, so I turned to the number 2 guy and said, give me 3 loud bow cows, which is, we won't help, we won't help. So that's my best definition of the Vietnamese. John put that massive hand on my shoulder, he was a warrant officer, and said, sir, respectively, if you do this, someone will be tortured. Let me do it. I'm best qualified. I said, John, we'll do it as a group. And he said it again. And when he said it the third time, I said, that's enough, John. And he went over and built himself a pile in the room where he would be taller than everybody else, where they would know he did it. Now let's jump ahead 2 years, and we were up on the China border. John, I was there on John's 48th birthday, his 30th year in the Marine Corps. He joined the Marine Corps when he was 18. And one night, he was in a little room and he hollered that he was sick, and he came out, and we all were out together. And that day, his fever went up all day long. And we took him in the room with us, a guy named Tom Curtis from Baytown and I, and tried to get his fever down. It didn't go up, and it kept going up. So about 10 o'clock that night, we asked for a guard, and they took him to they would take him to the hospital, which was just an isolation building about 50 yards from us. And I said, have Ted Steer, who was the senior man down there, come up tomorrow and wave or flash to us so we'll know what's going on. They didn't come up the next day at 2 o'clock. But about 6 o'clock, they carried a body out. I was not to see Ted for about 6 months. And I said, Ted, what happened? He said, John walked in the room, watched the guards, sat down on the bed and watched the guards. And when the guards left, he said, I have a message from Commander Clower. He said, what is it? He said, I have a message. He died trying to carry that message. I put him in for the Medal of Honor. He got the Navy Cross.
Are you proud that you're a veteran of our country?
Very proud. I'd go again if we have to. By the way, for your information, I went back to Vietnam after I was a prisoner. And I flew 3 more combat missions. I was asked what I wanted to do when I came back, and I said, if I'm going to stay in the Navy, I want to fly. I want to be in. So I got given a squadron of F-4s, and they called us in one day, and we were off Vietnam, and the war had been quiet for a while, and that was when Nixon stood down. And they said, we're going to fly missions. And the wing commander started to walk out of the room and said, Doug, I want to talk to you. And I said, yes, sir, what do you want? And he said, I don't want you to fly. And I said, I'm not going to ask my men to go off that cat without me first, the catapult. So as we went off, so I watched, and a few minutes later, over the 1MC, the phone came out, the speakers, and said, Admiral Red Dog Davis and his operations officer, Captain Sheets, is coming aboard. I knew Blinky Sheets had been an instructor of mine 20 years before. And when he walked in his room, I was standing outside of him, and I said, I want to talk to you. And he said, I want to talk to you. And he said, we walked in the room. We'd been friends for years. And I said, I got something to say. He said, I'm senior, I'm going to talk first. He said, the wing commander has never led a major mission. If we have one, you'll lead it. I said, thank you very much. I started to leave, and he said, what did you have to say? I said, I don't have to say anything. He said, why? And I told him that the wing commander didn't want me to fly, and he smiled. I flew that first kite off the cat. So would I do it? Yes.
In 30 seconds or 60 seconds, sum up your career in the military. I mean,
I have flown the fastest, the best, the quickest. I have flown the best that America had. I was in that first 100 and made 1,000 miles an hour. I've flown the best airplanes the world has ever made. And I have served with outstanding heroes, and I have served the greatest country in the world. I have nothing to do but be blessed. And I have a wonderful family.
And I don't know how you're going to cram this in, but your wife, when you were a prisoner of war.
Oh, let me tell you about it.
How hard was that?
Oh, it's harder on the women than it is on the men.
Did they write letters? Did you write letters?
I got 5 letters. They did not recognize me as a POW for 2 years. I got my first letter after 2 years. I was to receive 5 in 5 years. She was to receive 5 for me in 5 years. We had had a discussion before I left if I got shut down. And my answer, by the way, you've got to realize that I had a 12-year-old daughter. We'd been married 14 years when I got shut down. And so they said, you know, there wasn't any question. I said, if I make it the first year, I'll make it. I don't care how long, I'll be there. In 70, guys started getting Dear John letters. And I made the statement, I'll never get one. And they said, what makes you different? I said, you don't know my mother-in-law. By the way, she's living with us now. She's 96. I said, she'll tell her that you won't leave him while he's in trouble. That's what I read you the story and told you about the grandmother. The women and girlfriends and the wives and the mothers sent them to us. They sent us the best.
So did she pray for you every day, or she believe you were dead or alive, or what?
I told her I'd be back. She still had that same 58 Chevrolet I bought her when I left. I told her I'd buy a new car when I got home. When I called her and asked that first phone call, I couldn't think about just saying hello. And the second one, I made my normal list of things to ask. And I said, what kind of car have you got? She said, you told me you'd buy me a new one when you got home, and you hadn't got home yet.
One more question about that, okay? The first time you saw your wife and your was it your daughter?
Yes.
What kind of reunion was that? And where was that at? Tell me that.
San Diego.
Okay, tell me about that.
We landed in San Diego, and it was a planned ceremony. My wife did a little different than some of the others. She had not only my wife was there, my daughter was there. She had my mother, my stepfather, my sister, her children, her mother and daddy. And we rode from the airport to Balboa Hospital. And my wife made sure that all of the family would just see that I was okay. Maureen is you'd like her if you met her, okay? The same as she's doing right now, she's taking care of her mother. And that's what she would want to do, okay?
Was it a joyous reunion? Or was
very much so.
Your daughter was 5 years old?
18. I left her when she was 12. She was 18.
So was it a shock, or was it in your mind you're thinking?
Oh, I think she was a beautiful lady and always was. The same with Maureen. I don't think Maureen has really changed in the 57 years we've been together.
Can I ask what happened to your daughter?
On the 23rd or 22nd of November this year, I got a phone call from her, and we talked a while, and when we got through talking, I said, baby, I love you. And she said, Daddy, you don't know how much I love you. That was her last words to me. They took her to the hospital about 2 o'clock in the morning, and she died of a heart attack at 8:30. We just buried her.
This was just all of a sudden?
All of a sudden.
Nobody knew she was sick? Or?
She had been in the hospital a little before that, and she had a pacemaker, but we didn't expect this. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Buried around here?
In Beaumont. Maureen and her family are from the Beaumont area. Are you familiar with Beaumont?
I know where it's at.
Yeah.
Close to the Louisiana border, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, we're about done here. There's no stopping point, but I hope this is okay with you. At the end of my interviews, if you watch one of my films, and we're putting together a little segment of veterans in this area too. Clarence is helping me produce this, but I asked the veterans to salute into the camera. It's something that I do as a send-off.
No problem.
Is that okay for me?
No problem for me.
When I tell you, I want you to look right into the camera, Doug.
Okay.
Okay, sir, go ahead. Excellent, thank you.